Hello. So it's early October now. Winter's drawing in, the nights are getting longer and the temperature's dropping, and quite rightly people are starting to ask what should they do for their chickens in the winter that they don't normally do in the summer. So in this video I'm going to give you my take on what I think chickens are going to need in the winter, and more importantly some things that they really don't. So it is of course human nature to want to keep things warm and cozy and snuggly in the winter, and that's fine if you're a rabbit or a dog, but if you're a chicken, trust me, it's really not required. Why is that? Well, it's because they've had a couple of million years of evolution to sort that out for themselves, and that's because they've got feathers. Let's have a look at this one. Here she is. Some more over here. Let's look at these guys. So those feathers there, they're not only designed for flight, they're also designed to keep them warm. And what they do is they trap a layer of air between the skin and those feathers, and it stays there as long as there isn't a draft, and that's an important thing. You want to avoid drafts, but you want to give them ventilation, and that's the difference we're now going to look at. So what is the difference then between draft, which we don't want, and ventilation, which we absolutely do want? And why is draft a bad idea? Well, we've already discussed that the chicken's feathers are going to keep a layer of warm air between the feathers, between the skin and the feathers. And as long as that stays there, then they're going to be warm and cozy all night. But if you allow a draft to act or to come into the coop, then it's going to blow away that layer of warm air, and the chicken is going to start to get cold, which we don't want. So ventilation is vital, but a draft is kind of unwanted ventilation. And what we're going to do now is we'll look at my chicken tractor as an example, and we'll talk about what could be draft and what could be ventilation. So here's the tractor then, complete with the automatic door opener, of which I've done another video on, and it's designed to take part in a rotational system whereby we move the tractor on a daily basis, and we move this entire pen on a weekly basis to follow the sheep. You can see here where the tractor was last night. The chickens have been scratching around there all day fertilizing the ground, so that's working. So in terms of the design of the coop, getting ready for the winter, you can see it's divided into two areas here. There's mesh on the floor. The birds roost here on these perches, and their poop goes through the floor onto the ground and fertilizing it, which is the main idea of the rotational system. And there's ventilation on the bottom because they sit on this 1-inch mesh through which the poop drops, and you'll get fresh air coming through the bottom, but you don't get a draft. Then at the top here you can see daylight through the roof at the end there, and we have some ventilation holes in the side. And if I bring it back here, you can see there that the roof is fully ventilated. So the chickens spend their time either on these perches or at the back there in the nest boxes, and they're pretty draft free really. Obviously that door shuts at night. They have ventilation in the floor, the warm air, the moisture rises, and then it's taken away by the fresh air through the holes in the top. But once this door is closed, and once that automatic door is closed, there's no real draft in there at all. So they're not exposed to a draft in the cold weather, but they are exposed, or the coop does have excellent ventilation, and the chances of any moisture building up inside this tractor are very small indeed. If, however, we do get forecast of severe weather, so if there's a snowstorm coming, if there's high winds and there's a chance of drifting snow, what I might do is I might not move this for a couple of days. I might get some hay bales and put them down here just to stop any drifting snow going under the coop. But in terms of the health of the chickens, they're going to be very healthy indeed in there. You can see them scratching around at the grass where the tractor was last night. While we're on the subject of shelter, just a few seconds on snow. Chickens do not like snow. They won't come out of the coop if there's snow on the ground. So it's well worth getting some hay or some straw and spreading it on the ground so that they can come out and get some fresh air. Maybe put it between the coop and the shelter so that they've got a little a path that they can run along to keep themselves out of the snow, because they don't like on the snow at all. So that's another top tip. If it is snowing, get some hay, get some straw, put it down, and it'll keep their feet warm. So why is ventilation so important? Well, let's use this coop as an example. Imagine now it's mid-December, it's approaching 4 o'clock in the afternoon. We've sealed this ventilation panel up here because we don't want our chickens to get cold. So they've just gone in there and it's 4 o'clock. They'll roost now from about 4 until, at this time of year, maybe 9 o'clock the next day. It's December the 21st. And the temperature is -5, which is pretty common for most of the areas in the UK. It's 9 o'clock. We open the door. The chickens, and there are 8 in that coop that I've just shown you, the chickens have been in there all night. They've been breathing away. They've been pooping. There's an awful lot of moisture in there, and it's had nowhere to go. Why? Because we want to keep them warm and we want to keep them cozy. But their feathers are now moist. We open the door. You've got -4 air rushing in. The chickens come out into the cold, and they're in trouble. Their temperature is going to drop really, really fast, and that is not something that you want them to do. Their combs are going to be wet, their feet are going to be wet, and they could quite easily get frostbite. So that's one of the main reasons why they need ventilation, and in particular we do not want to coop them up with no air whatsoever just because we want to keep them warm and cozy. Let's talk about deep littering then. Deep littering, if you don't know what it is a process or a system by which you might put 4 inches of wood chip or organic material, organic bedding in the bottom of the coop, and then you let the chickens live there, and they poop on top of that, and instead of clearing it out, you put more bedding on the top of that, and so on and so on and so on, all winter. Now, it has some bonuses. Some people think that, in fact, it's true, that composting will go on in that deep bedding, and that will provide warmth, that will heat up all the bacteria and stuff that go on in there, will produce heat, and that'll warm the coop. So if you're going to do that, that's fine. But if you're going to try deep bedding, it's even more important that you sort the ventilation out as well, because imagine all that moisture and all that warmth that's coming out of that deep litter is going to keep the coop warm, but it's also going to keep it moist, and that's going to add to the condensation on in the chicken's breath. It's going to add to the moisture in the coop if there isn't ventilation, and then they're going to come out in the morning, as we've already seen. They're going to be moist, their combs are going to be wet, and then the danger of frostbite is really intense there. But yeah, the idea of deep litter is that instead of cleaning this out, you would just add more organic material, organic bedding onto the top of this, and keep doing so until it builds up and builds up. And by the end of the winter, some people have maybe 8 or 12 inches of bedding here, composting away happily. But if you didn't have that, then it's not going to be a nice place to live. Again, 17 hours a day or 17 hours a night cooped up in here with no ventilation. Yes, it'll be warm, but they'll have respiratory issues, and there'll be lots of other health issues that we have to think about. So deep litter. Deep litter, good idea. I don't use it. I prefer to clean them out on a weekly basis. But if you are going to use deep litter, it's even more important that you get the ventilation sorted. One of the other things I give my hens in the winter is some form of shelter which isn't the coop. You can see here the winter chicken shelter that I built, and I've made a separate video on this, and I'll put the link in the comments below, so I won't go into this in too much detail, but I'll just give you a look at it now. They spend a lot of time in here during the day, and it gets them out of the coop. I want to say a big thank you to one of my viewers, Claire, who reminded me of the importance of that in there, which is a sand bath. And they love it. So in there I put some play sand, wood ash, which I get from the log fire. I pop that in there as well, and you can put some mite powder in there as well. And Claire quite rightly said, and she reminded me, it's vital for them to have somewhere to have a sand bath or a dust bath during the winter, somewhere where it's dry. Most of the grass around here is obviously going to be wet most of the time, so I keep the sand bath in here now, and it gives them the opportunity to go in and give themselves a bit of a dust down, and hopefully control the mites, because they do spend a lot of time in the coop, and even though there is ventilation in there, then the chances of getting mites in the winter are probably going to be just as high in the summer. So there's the dust bath, there's the shelter. If you want more details on it, you can watch the video. Completely separate video called, I think it's called Winter Chicken Shelter, and that's shelter covered. So we've spoken about coops, we've spoken about shelters, we've spoken about the importance of ventilation. Now let's just have a quick talk about food. It's a relatively simple one, this. You don't need to change their food from their normal food during the winter. These guys are on growers pellets, I've got others on layers pellets, and I'm not going to change that. What you might want to do though is ensure that they do have food available towards the end of the day, and it does give them something to fill their crops with when they go to bed. I also give mine a handful of corn as well, not these chicks, they're too young, but the grown-up ones, I do give them a handful of corn, and again it gives them something to fill their crops with, and gives them some heat in there ready for bed. You also may want to think about giving them a treat like this. These are porridge oats made with water, put in the microwave for a couple of minutes, and then let it cool down a little bit, but they're still warm. There's a great treat for them on a cold winter's morning. You don't have to give them to them every day, just the occasional treat, and you'll see how much these guys like them. Come on. There you go. A perfect treat for a cold winter's morning. So regards water in the winter, there's not really a lot you can do. If you have a small number of chickens in a coop in a garden, it would be possible to run some form of extension lead out to the coop, and you can get heat pads which run off mains electricity, which sit under the water and keep those keep the water not frozen. But if, like me, you've got chickens all over the place, it's very, very difficult to do. I'm looking at ideas for maybe some 12-volt pads at the moment, but I haven't found any. If you know of any, please let me know in the comments below. But it's no secret. Ultimately, what I do is in the evenings I go and pick up all of the water containers from the coops. I bring them inside. I bring them inside the stable so that the temperature is above freezing. And then in the mornings I take the water out and give it back to the chickens. I'm forgetting most of the time, so what I do is I have more water containers than I need. So if I do leave one out overnight and it turns into a block of ice, then I've got some spare ones inside as well. So no real secrets in terms of water. Water freezes in the winter. You're going to have to deal with it in your own way. With a small coop, You can get water heaters, but if you've got a small holding like me, then you've got to come up with some other ideas or take the water in at night. So we've spoken about what I think your chickens are going to need during the winter: a coop with good ventilation, some form of shelter that means that they don't have to sit inside the coop all day. We've discussed food, we've discussed water. Now let's just discuss some things that I personally think they don't need, and that is heat and light, extra light. Heat-wise, there is a caveat on that. If you live in Alaska or Siberia and the temperature is going to be -40, then I'm afraid I have no experience of operating in those, of bringing up chickens in those temperatures. So I'm sure there will be people out there that can give you better advice than me. But I'm just talking about a good old temperate British winter where the temperature is going to get down to what, sort of -5, -10 at most. I don't think there's any need for extra heat in the coop. I think it encourages the chickens to stay in the coop, which you don't want, and the temperature difference between the inside of the coop, which is going to be warm if you put heat in there, and a -5 outside, is going to cause problems. I also think it adds to respiratory issues inside the coop. It's not only now going to be moist because of the condensation coming from their breath, and if you're deep littering, the condensation coming from that, but now it's going to be heated up by the heater, and it's going to make life more dangerous for them, in my opinion, in terms of respiratory illnesses and mites. And lastly, light. Now, I don't depend on my hens for egg production. I don't depend on them financially for egg production. Yes, I sell some eggs occasionally, but I'm in the position where it's not going to bankrupt me if they don't start, or if they don't lay eggs as often as they do in the summer. So I'm a big fan of saying let winter, or let nature do its thing. They won't lay as many eggs in the winter, so accept it. Don't put false light in there so that they think it's summer, and therefore the egg production is up. Nature knows best. In the winter they need a bit of a break. The minerals aren't going to be there, the light isn't going to be there, and they don't lay eggs for a reason. So I don't encourage my hens to lay them by giving them artificial light in the winter. So heat and light are two things I don't think they're going to need. So that's it really. I've told you what I think your chickens are going to need in the winter. If there's one thing, just one thing you take away from this video, please let it be the need for ventilation. I know I keep going on about it, but I'm passionate about it. My coops, my tractors are well ventilated. Some people will say they are too well ventilated, but I'm a massive proponent of the open air coops, actually. Somebody wrote a book back in 1924 called, I think it's Open Air Coops, and I'm going to get a copy, and I recommend you have a look online yourself. Chickens, as we said, have been evolving for years. They've been around for a few million years longer than we have, and they seem to have done okay on their own. So let's leave it to nature, let's leave it to evolution, and ventilation is the one thing, if you can take away from this video, then please do, and your chickens will be fine. Hopefully your chickens will be great right the way through the winter. Let me know if you've got any questions. Thanks very much for watching.